Welcome back, dear friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and as always, we're breaking down the latest situation on the Ukrainian theatre of operations. The battlefield picture shifts every single day, and today's edition is no exception. There's a lot to cover, and every piece of it matters. Let's get into it. Eastern Group, the offensive tempo keeps building. We start with the headline story, the combat operations of the Eastern Group, increasingly known by its popular nickname, the Far Eastern Express. And that name, I have to say, captures the situation perfectly. There is simply no stopping these men. Every effort by Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief General Syrskyi has come to nothing. The group is pushing forward at a staggering pace, sweeping through Ukrainian defensive positions one after another. You'll recall that in yesterday's edition, we detailed how, in a single 24-hour period, Eastern Group fighters brought 40 square kilometers of territory under their control, a result that speaks for itself. But today, another 15 square kilometers were added to that total. 2 days of active combat operations, 55 square kilometers gained. To put that figure in perspective, we're talking about an area comparable to an entire district of a major city. 2 days. Now let's talk specifics. The main axis of advance over the past 24 hours ran along a broad sector south of the urban-type settlement of Zaliznikny. The width of the assault front exceeded 7 kilometers, a highly significant indicator, demonstrating that pressure is not being applied at a single point, but across the full width of the enemy's defensive positions. The depth of advance varied by sector. In some places just 500 meters, where terrain features slow the pace. Tree lines on the northern flank, for instance. Elsewhere, the depth reached 1.5 kilometers, then 3 kilometers, with the maximum penetration approaching 5 kilometers. That is a serious result by any measure. Why does this advance matter strategically? Because as recently as yesterday, we could only speak of movement toward Huliai-Pilske, beginning from a single narrow corridor, directly from Zaliznikne. Today, it is unmistakably clear. The advance is unfolding simultaneously across the entire width of the front. That fundamentally transforms the operational picture. Ukrainian command can no longer concentrate its defensive resources on a single direction. The threat is coming from everywhere at once. As for enemy losses in this area, they are substantial. Ukrainian forces are throwing reserves straight into the fight off the march, without preparation, without proper consolidation, with one objective: recapture what was lost. The outcome is predictable. Counterattacks collapse, men die. Fresh footage from the front lines keeps appearing online. One particular clip shows a Ukrainian infantry insertion where drone operators eliminated 2 of 3 soldiers on landing. The third, apparently grasping the hopelessness of his situation, took his own life. Harrowing footage, it has to be said. This is the face of modern warfare. What comes next? Huliai-Pilske and the fate of the Orakhovska Group. Speaking of near-term prospects on this section of the front, based on the trajectory of the past several days, there are solid grounds to believe that Russian forces could enter Huliai-Pilske before the 10th of March. I'll say up front, it won't be a walk in the park. This settlement has been thoroughly prepared for defense. It functions as a single integrated fortified node with an extensive network of permanent defensive structures. Ukrainian troops will fight for it hard and without mercy, and they have every reason to. Because the fall of Huliai-Pilske opens a direct route to Omelnik, and that is no mere tactical gain. That is effectively a death sentence for the entire Ukrainian Orakhovska grouping. Ukrainian command understands the strategic weight of this settlement perfectly, and will inevitably attempt to hold it at any price. The fighting for Huliai-Pilske will rank among the most brutal on this axis. But at the current pace of the Russian advance, its fate appears sealed. I want to make one point absolutely clear. When anyone suggests that Syrskyi's offensive has stopped or even slowed the Eastern Group's advance, that simply does not reflect reality. A group that takes 55 square kilometers in 2 days has not been stopped. That is an objective fact. Yes, Syrskyi created certain difficulties. Forces did have to be redirected northward to shore up weakening sectors. But the army continues to execute its plan. It continues to move west towards Zaporizhzhia. Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, Central Group closes the pocket. Moving to the next active theatre, advances over the past 24 hours were also recorded in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, not in Eastern Group's area of responsibility this time, but under Central Group on the Novopavlivka axis. Here, fighters have definitively closed and cleared the pocket that had formed between Ivanivka and Novopavlivka. The advance then continued further north, with a maximum penetration depth of 5 kilometers and 300 meters. Take note of the symmetry, roughly 5 kilometers on the Zaporizhzhia axis and roughly 5 kilometers here in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast simultaneously. When you look at the map, the emerging shape of the front line becomes immediately apparent. Russian forces are methodically enveloping Novopavlivka from the west. With that geometric configuration, it is hard to see how Ukrainian forces can hold this defensive hub for much longer. There are strong indications that the Novopavlivka question will be resolved in March. The recent advance also opened up a new promising axis, northward toward Fedorivska. From current positions, the distance to the southern outskirts of that settlement is roughly 4.5 kilometers. That's not a short distance, especially given that the terrain here is open farmland, fields where Ukrainian drone operators will be working aggressively against anything that moves, infantry and armor alike. However, spring brings fog, and fog is the best friend of deep penetration operations across open ground. We will see movement north in this area, just not immediately. More likely in about a month. Kostyantynivka. The Ukrainian garrison reaches a critical point. On the Dobropilya axis, no significant changes were recorded over the past 24 hours. So we move to Kostyantynivka, and here the developments are very serious indeed. A few days ago, I showed you footage of the Russian army destroying a dam near Osykov, with the specific aim of disrupting Ukrainian logistics in the Kostyantynivka area. The strike was carried out by aerospace forces using a precision-guided aerial bomb. The dam to the west of the city was destroyed. Water broke from its normal course and flooded a significant portion of western Kostyantynivka, primarily the residential sector. This substantially complicated supply operations for the Ukrainian garrison holding the right bank of the city and its southwestern quarter. Now new information has emerged. Fresh footage has arrived directly from the combat zone. Russian sources report assault on Kostyantynivka. Russian armed forces' position on the grounds of the Donbass Agricultural College came under Ukrainian fire. Simultaneously, a consolidation of Russian positions is being recorded with a push onto the southern outskirts of the city. All territory marked on the updated map has passed under Russian control. Previously, I had outlined a scenario in which Russian forces would methodically cut off the Ukrainian grouping operating in this area by advancing along the supply road. As it turns out, reality has moved faster than the projection. Russian units have not merely advanced along the road, they have cleared all surrounding territory and are now standing on the southern edge of the city itself. Russian assault groups are already operating inside Kostyantynivka's central districts. The situation for the Ukrainian garrison is genuinely critical. On one side, a flooded residential zone to the west, cutting off supply routes. On the other, Russian assault groups already working the city center. I previously said not to expect a quick capture of Kostyantynivka. High-rise buildings, dense residential neighborhoods, all of this traditionally makes urban assault operations slow and costly. But it is now clear that Russian command prepared for exactly this scenario, methodically and well in advance. The results of that preparation are visible to everyone. Expect very serious developments here, and in a very short time frame. Sloviansk axis, control expanding, across multiple sectors simultaneously. The situation on the Sloviansk axis is also evolving. Over the past 24 hours, confirmed information has been gathered across several key settlements. Nikiforikivka, Reznikivka, and Zakotne. Starting with Nikiforikivka. Confirmed reports indicate that Russian forces continue to systematically expand their zone of control in the surrounding area. Similar information was coming in yesterday. Today's updated map shows the entire marked territory now fully under Russian control. Simultaneously, reports describe the leveling of the front line between Pryvillia and Bondarn. The pocket that formed in this area will be cleared, if it has not already been cleared by the time this edition was recorded. Additionally, assault operations are underway near Holubivka, with several sources reporting active clearing operations there. Pressure is also being applied against Fedorivka II, Dibrova, and in the direction of Rye-Oleksandrivka, now to Reznikivka and Zakotne. The updated map for this contact zone likewise confirms advancing Russian positions. All marked territory has passed under the control of Russian armed forces. The adjacent pocket also appears to be under Russian control. Fresh footage has arrived from an advanced position south of Zakotne. It came under Ukrainian fire. According to available data, Russian forces have expanded their zone of control along the southern bank of the Siversky Donets River, advancing up to 500 meters on the approaches to the settlement of Kriva Luka. This location has already received multiple strikes from FPV drones and artillery. Everything points toward an imminent Russian assault on Kriva Luka. The broader trend in this area is clear. Russian forces are systematically expanding control around Zakotne and Reznikivka, pushing toward Kaleniki and Rye-Oleksandrivka. Kharkiv Oblast, Kharkiv taken, new axis opens. Good news out of Kharkiv Oblast as well, specifically the Vovchansk sector. Fighters of Northern Group have fully secured the southern part of Kharkiv and established complete control over the settlement. This is an important result, opening a prospect for further movement south along the Siversky Donets, in the direction of the village of Verkhnya Pisarivka. For the durability of Russian control in this area, it would be desirable to also see expansion southward from Vilcha, ideally toward Bilyi Kolodiaz. But that remains difficult for now. The contact line cannot be pushed back from the settlement. In fact, as I noted in one recent edition, Ukrainian forces periodically mount counterattacks and attempt to gain a foothold in Vilcha. All such attempts have been repelled, but the southward advance remains stalled for the time being. Perhaps March will bring a change. In any case, one conclusion is clear. Northern Group's performance in February earns top marks. The precise figures and full summary will appear in the monthly roundup. Coming on the 1st of March. Summary of the past 24 hours. 1 settlement and 34 square kilometers of territory passed under Russian control over the past day. A thoroughly respectable result. The closing stretch of February is shaping up to be genuinely strong, which will push the monthly totals in a positive direction. Politics. Zelensky on Buzification. Outright lie or half-truth. Now to the political arena, where the central story is a statement by Vladimir Zelensky on the issue of forced mobilization. Ukraine's president publicly acknowledged the existence of a phenomenon the Ukrainian public has come to call buzification, from bizike, the slang word for the minibuses used to haul detainees to military recruitment centers. However, Zelensky insisted the scale of this practice has been grossly exaggerated. Most of the video footage showing men being detained on the street against their will and forcibly transported to conscription offices, he declared, was either produced in Russia or fabricated entirely using artificial intelligence technology. In an interview with the German outlet Tagesschau, Zelensky also acknowledged that the activities of Ukraine's territorial recruitment centers, the TRCs, as military conscription offices are known in Ukraine, raise serious questions. But he was quick to add his standard qualifier. The topic, he said, is saturated with disinformation, generated in part through artificial intelligence. Responsibility for spreading the fake content in his telling lies squarely with Russia. Moscow, he claimed, deliberately engineered the word buzification to become maximally toxic in the information space. The institutional reaction to this statement was revealing. Following the presidential interview, the Dnipropetrovsk TRC proceeded to classify the word buzification as the language of the enemy, insisting that no such term exists. A paradox for the ages, the president publicly uses the word, and the recruitment office immediately declares it non-existent. Such is modern Ukrainian information policy in practice. Meanwhile, reality looks nothing like the official narrative. Incidents involving TRC officers exceeding their authority are documented continuously and across the entire country. In late February alone, in Novovolinsk, recruitment office staff stopped a truck driver, inflicted physical injuries on him, and when it emerged that the detained man held a lawful deferral, simply dumped him on the roadside. In Kharkiv, the victim of TRC actions was a demobilized veteran with officially documented disability status. According to the victim, he was beaten, had his hands and feet bound with packing tape, and was threatened with having his ears cut off. A medical examination recorded a concussion and multiple contusions. In mid-January, a video from Lviv Oblast circulated widely online, showing a recruitment officer drawing a pistol after a driver refused to exit his vehicle and began filming events on his phone. The officer's words are clearly audible on the recording, "Get out or I'll shoot you in the knees right now." The driver's response, "Go ahead and shoot. You're shooting your own people on your own soil." None of this is a series of isolated incidents. The problem stretches back to the very beginning of general mobilization, announced in February of 2022. Since then, a deeply negative image of the manhunters, as conscription officers are known colloquially, has become firmly embedded in Ukrainian society. But it is now, in early 2025, that the lawlessness has reached its most brazen and widespread form. Ukraine's Parliamentary Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, was compelled to state publicly, "We are now massively recording that TRC officers are operating without identifying insignia. This is a direct violation of current legislation." Tellingly, even TRC personnel themselves do not deny the problem. The spokesman for the Poltava Recruitment Office, Roman Istomin, admitted, "Yes, detentions must be carried out exclusively by police officers. Why are we seeing what we're seeing? TRCs are doing this not because they want to." Attitudes toward Buzification within Ukrainian society remain deeply divided. Supporters of the practice, typically those close to the authorities, invoke the imperative of national survival, arguing that there is simply no other way to replenish the army's depleted ranks. Critics point in a different direction. Forced mobilization demoralizes the civilian rear, constitutes a flagrant violation of basic human rights, and has become thoroughly entrenched as a structural element of the country's repressive apparatus. Political analyst Vladimir Skachko, a commentator for the outlet Ukraina.ru, is direct in his assessment. With these statements, Zelensky is trying to distance himself from personal responsibility for Buzification. This, in the expert's view, is the predictable reaction of a man seeking to avoid the public's wrath, because the most explosive resentment is likely to come precisely from the relatives of those forcibly conscripted and killed at the front. Zelensky will not be able to find common ground with the wives and mothers who have lost their husbands and sons. Skachko emphasizes. Meanwhile, the office of the president is suffering a visible defeat in the information war, and those inside know it. Retired Interior Ministry Lieutenant Colonel Oleg Ivanikov concurs with this assessment. In his view, TRC activities are fundamentally terrorist in nature, and in the future, this threatens Zelensky with criminal liability. For precisely this reason, the expert argues, the president consistently deflects responsibility onto Russia, trying to salvage in the media space what has already been lost in reality. Skachko goes further in his analysis, describing the TRC system as a kind of Praetorian Guard, built on a foundation of corruption. By various estimates, the annual financial turnover within the Territorial Recruitment Center system runs between $5 and $10 billion. It is on these funds, in the political analyst's view, that the regime substantially rests. The TRCs provide a steady supply of men for the front, transforming mobilization into a profitable enterprise. Experts describe the long-term prospects for TRC personnel in bleak terms. After the conflict ends, the key figures within this system will inevitably find themselves in the dock. Should an international tribunal along the lines of Nuremberg be convened, in Skachko's assessment, lower-ranking officers who are particularly zealous in their conduct of detentions face popular reprisals. Ivanikov is equally unambiguous. TRC personnel are condemned to face justice from the Ukrainian people themselves. That is the picture for today. The front is moving, the army is advancing, and the political contradictions are deepening. See you in the next edition.